We've been developing add-on solutions for Sage 300 for many years now. We're based in Sydney, Australia, and at this stage we have over 5,000 sites using our modules, and most sites have at least 2 modules implemented. All our modules are written in the Sage 300 SDK, and what this means for you is it should be transparent to you that you're running a third-party module, but most importantly, it supports all the standard Sage 300 functionality. For example, the report writers that Sage 300 that can be used on Sage 300, the database utilities like data integrity, like dump and load, all the standard features that you'd expect from a Sage 300 core module, you can expect from a Sage 300 add-on module written by Orchid. We have a large number of modules, 13 in fact, all covering off different aspects or adding extra functionality around Sage 300. But the ones that I'm going to concentrate on today are the ones really listed in this tailoring your system and integration. So it's optional tables, extender, and how you can use Orchid modules to adapt Sage 300 to your exact procedures and processes, and to cater for the additional requirements that you have over and above the standard GL, AR, AP, and order entry distribution. So how can you adapt a standard package system to meet your specific processing requirements, be it in the budgeting and forecasting area, or be it in the data entry, alerting, and how to manage by exception area, or even systems integration. So 2 slightly different topics. So I'm going to split them up and first look at 2 of our modules, Info Explorer and Optional Tables, and what they allow you to do with your Sage 300. And I thought the best way to demonstrate this is first to demonstrate the software and then come back and highlight what modules I was using and how I was using those, rather than spending ages on PowerPoint initially and then getting into the data. I think these ones are easier to visualize what we're trying to do. So I'm just going to flip into my Sage 300. And I believe that the upload speed is a little bit slow. So I'm just going to pause a little bit here to make sure that you can see my Sage 300 screen.
We can see that.
You can? Okay. So optional tables. What this module allows you to do is to create your own tables in Sage 300 with the express purpose of storing budget data in them. So as you know, Sage 300 allows you to budget at a general ledger account level, so per fiscal year and period. At the GL account level, you can enter your budgeted amounts, your monthly amounts that you expect, and then report actual versus budget using any number of the reporting tools that come with Sage 300 or that can be clipped onto Sage 300. But what's not so obvious how to do, and in fact Sage 300 can't cater for, is if you wanted to budget at a lower level than your general ledger account. And that might be at a general ledger account and optional field level. You might be flowing your sales reps into general ledger and budgeting and wanting to budget at a general ledger account code and optional field and sales rep level. Or perhaps you flow a project code optional field into the general ledger and you want to budget at that more detailed level lower than the general ledger account. Or perhaps even you want to budget at a customer item level or a customer salesperson level or an item category salesperson level. So what typically happens in these scenarios is people are capturing that budget outside in another system or perhaps even in Excel, but it makes it hard to, and very manual then, to report your actual versus budget. So what optional table allows you to do is to create, and the example that I'm going to show you is budgeting at a customer and item level. So I can create myself an info set, what we call an info set, but let's just think of it as a table, which is geared to capture customer and item budgets. And furthermore, what it allows you to do is a little bit like your financial reporter, is to use Excel to report on this data, both report or, most importantly, capture that data. So I'm just opening up this icon and I'm clicking OK to allow Excel to open up my macro, which gives me an add-in. So I've got my financial reporter, but also I've got my information manager add-in, which allows me to read information from Sage 300 and put it in the spreadsheet, and write information from the spreadsheet back into Sage 300. So this is the scenario where I want to use Excel as my collection method for my budget, and then without having to reformat the Excel spreadsheet, I can just click a button to update the Sage 300 database with those budgeted figures. So opening up a sample spreadsheet, and in my scenario, as I explained, I want to capture my budget for my customer code and my item code. And in my scenario, I'm budgeting 3 separate values. I'm budgeting a sales value, I'm budgeting a sales quantity, and I'm also budgeting a cost of sales, so that I've got the margin as well, or I'm indirectly budgeting my sales margin as well. But it's up to you how many fields you want to keep at your in your info set. In my case, I'm keeping 3: sales value, quantity, and cost value, per customer and item, and per fiscal year and fiscal period. So this is the spreadsheet that I designed for sales rep 1, who's responsible for this handful of items, this handful of customers and this handful of items. And I would send them the spreadsheet and ask them to enter the sales value. Now, whether I populated this first with last year's actuals, or I put some sort of formulas so that the cost is a function of the sales value, or the sales value has, we have a price list, and once I enter the quantity, the sales value is reflected through, and the cost is a percentage of that. However you normally do, however much you automate your spreadsheets in Excel, that can still be done. In my case, it was just straightforward data entry in these white cells. And my design was this gets sent out to the appropriate sales rep, they key in the figures, then they send it back to me as the budget coordinator to validate, make sure this looks okay, and when I'm happy, I would go to my add-ins menu and click write. So the only person who needs a Sage 300 land pack in this scenario is me. Once I get the spreadsheet back, I need to open the spreadsheet using the information manager icon to update from Excel's, and then I can update those particular figures back into my Sage 300 database. So how does this happen? If I unhide my hidden formulas in the side here, and just not to scare you off with this formula, but just to talk you through it. What this formula is saying is information manager EB is the 2-letter code. Take the value that's sitting in cell G8 and update my optional field called bud value, my info set called budget. And then here in A8, I find the customer code, D8, I find the item code, and then it's the date, fiscal year, and fiscal period. So for those of you who write your FR specifications, you can see it's very similar to your FR, your GL report writer, in as much as you write a formula, or you don't, you use the formula wizards to add these formulas for you. And basically, the structure of your spreadsheet, where you ask people to enter the data, can be pretty much anything you want, as long as your formula can refer to, in my case, the customer, the item, the date, the fiscal year, and fiscal period. I can have any structure in my spreadsheet, and I can be capturing any number of optional fields in, this one's my bud value, which is my budgeted sales value. Whereas if I was to click in this one, it's exactly the same formula referring to slightly different cells, but that's my budget quantity. And further down, it would be my budget cost. So I don't need to reformat this so it matches a Sage 300 typical import, although you can do that if you want. And when I click Write, what this is going to do is bundle up all those EB formulas and update our Sage 300 database with all that data. I could amend these figures and update, or I could have, if I wanted to see what the figures first were, I could read. If I already had some information in our database, I could read this through and then update the figures and then write it back. So that process would happen sales rep by sales rep, but now we have all this budget information in the database. And we could either use Excel and look at all the data all at once, or a more convenient tool for consolidating this information is Info Explorer. So if I launch so Info Explorer is our cube viewer, which allows you to have a cube for analysis purposes and or budget purposes if you want on any area of your Sage 300. This particular cube is showing me my budgeted and actual sales by customer and by item. And I can also break that down by item category and by salesperson. So I'm in my sample company, which the data is in 2019 and 2020. And here I'm seeing my customer sales for those months. I'm currently looking at net sales. This dashboard is also showing me my item sales. It's showing me some of my salesperson statistics for both 2019 and 2020. But this dashboard is really just a collection of different views that you have on the data. So in this particular case, I can, if I want to look at the data in more detail than just the dashboard, I can look at any of my pre-saved views. This particular one, OE sales by customers, actually showing me my budgeted cost, quantity, sales, and a calculated margin that the cube has done. So you can add formulas to do calculations in the cube. And this is the data that I've just updated from the spreadsheet, or when I updated just before I clicked refresh last time when I refreshed this particular cube. So I can analyze this data. Currently, I'm just looking here at budget, but if I wanted to, I could say, well, let's just look at our budgeted sales. So we'll remove from that our cost, quantity, and margin, and I want to see that sitting side by side with my actual sales. So if I pop net sales down there, and now I could say currently I'm filtering and I'm only looking at the year 2020. So let's just get rid of months so I don't have too many columns, and select to show my 2019 and 2020. So now I'm viewing my budgeted sales for 2019, which I didn't do, my net sales for 2019, budgeted sales for 2020, and net sales year to date so far for 2020. And normal visualization type things I can do. I could say, well, let's look at our row totals if I wanted to see what that total was by customer. Or if I had said I really want to see a group by items, so I want to see my item budget and then which customer it breaks down to. Or I could drag down any of the other dimensions that are in this particular cube, so salesperson, account set, and so on. So you use Info Explorer for analysis, in this case actual and budget, but it could have just been actuals, it could be any subledger or any data that you have in your Sage 300 database, or in fact any database. You can combine the data into a cube. But what the main thing I wanted to run through is you're also able to use Info Explorer to help you updating that info set. So I've initially collected all my data per sales rep. Maybe I had 20 spreadsheets, which has now all been imported into the database. And now I want to review at a higher level, what does that mean per customer and item? What does my overall budget look like? So this particular view I've created, shows me the budget so far that I've got for 2020, budgeted cost, budgeted quantity, and budgeted sales value. Yes, I could drag down and show me my calculated budgeted margin if I wanted to, and I could be looking at it, you know, items grouped by customer or customers grouped by item, either way that you want to do. But if you want to use this tool to help you with your budgeting, what you can do is use the Worksets tab. And the Worksets tab works a little bit like if you imagine a copy-paste special values would in Excel. You can create as many worksets as you want. When you create a new workset, it automatically names it, but you could rename it to what's relevant for you. And maybe this is my first re-estimate. So I now have this copy of data as my first re-estimate. And what it allows me to do, I'm looking at my budgeted quantity, and I've only really budgeted for a handful of customers in the and items in the accessories group. And what I could do is drag down my month and see, and drag down my item and see the individual amounts per customer, per item, per fiscal year and period, and I could change at that level. Or what I can do is change at a total level. So for example, if I said I wanted to increase my budgeted sales amount by 10%, I could choose a spreading method of percentage increase, and then I could come and type in here 10, and that will increase my sales amount by 10%. It's also changing the color of my amended cells. So I've applied a pink background and blue font for anything that I've amended in this particular cube. So tomorrow, when I open this cube again, I would see, I would remember where I'm up to by virtue of which ones that I have saved, you know, which ones are showing to me as pink. So I've increased my sales, and perhaps I want to say, well, at the same time, I'm going to decrease my cost, maybe by 5%, hopefully. So I could enter -5% here and decrease my cost. So this is a very useful method to view your data now in a consolidated way. I'm not seeing individual spreadsheet by individual spreadsheet and having to use Excel to consolidate and link the spreadsheets and all the inherent issues with that. You're using the Cube Viewer to view this data at a consolidated level and to be able to manipulate it. And if it made sense at this point, if this is, you know, I could save this, open it up tomorrow, I could do some more amendments, or in fact, email this cube to somebody if I wanted to show them the effect on the, you know, on our margin based on these calculations. Or I can also use this if I wanted to change a total and use a different measure as our spread method. So for example, if my sales was 0 and I wanted to set it to last year's actual, I could key in last year's actual and tell it to spread it proportionately based on my version of based on the version of, so I need to change my year. I would say change the year to, in my case, 2019, and I would base it based on the spread in 2019, matching the salesperson, matching the customer, matching all the other attributes that we're doing. So you can spread your data or start your budget based on last year's actual and then add your 10% or less your 10% and so on. And just as I'm doing this here on my customer item budget, it could also have been my general ledger budget. You could create an info set linked to your general ledger budget, and I could be manipulating my revenue and cost of sales accounts or expenses accounts in the same way. And once you're happy with those figures, what you would do is click Write Back. And this particular cube is geared to write back to the info set. If you're doing GL budgets, it could either write back to your custom info set, or it could write back to your GL budget set 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, whichever one you configure to work with. So, you know, using a combination of InfoSets and Info Explorer, you can have a much more streamlined process around, an easier process to follow around the collection and manipulation and of your budget data, and subsequently reporting against the budget data, actual versus budget, as all the information is in your Sage 300 database, available for whatever report writer you use to do your reporting at that level. So that's really what I wanted to show you on using InfoSets and Info Explorer for your budgeting, actual versus budget, or budgeting and forecasting. So I'm just going to flick back to my PowerPoint presentation. And so I've shown you the information. And just to remind myself that I've gone through all this information, Info Explorer is, you know, the ability to analyze in a cube viewer style reporting tool, rather than having 10 or 15 different crystal reports to look at the information. You can have one cube, and then by dragging and dropping the rows and columns, as I did to see my budget margin or include year, you can include any of the data that's been configured for that particular cube as a row or a column, or as a fact. You can you know, analyze and drill down. What I didn't show you is from the Info Explorer cube, you can actually, if configured, drill into the associated Sage 300 data entry screen. So in my case, I'm looking at customer activity here, so I could drill through to my AR customer activity. And at this stage, I am using a Sage 300 land pack. At this stage, it's using Sage 300 security. I had to log into that particular data in order to open up my AR customer activity. But your cubes could be linking back to GL transactions, to order entry, invoices, credit notes, so on. So any screen that allows you to drill down, if that drill through into, if your cube has been configured correctly on that particular data, you'll be able to drill back and look at, in this case, you know, I'm opening up the AR custom inquiry. And you can use Info Explorer for your analysis and also for your budget manipulation, either from a bottom-up point of view or a top-down point of view. And using the same tool for both your analysis and your budgeting and forecasting, you know, really helps you streamline your processes and get rid of the manual processes that you might have in combining your actuals versus your budget. And I also went through, so that I have shown you, and I also went through at a high level our optional tables module, which allows you to store extra information inside your Sage 300 database, which makes it convenient and possible then to report actual versus budget. You can configure at what level you want to store this information. I demonstrated customer versus item, customer and item per fiscal year and period, but you could also be doing any combination of Sage 300 reference files. You might want to keep some sort of budgeted value for your vendors and items, or perhaps just items in total. You do have the item forecast area in Sage 300, but if you wanted to keep more information rather than just a single forecast figure, like you wanted to keep track of the quantity as well and the cost as well, you could be having an info set linked to items. Or perhaps you want to keep track of that information per sales rep or per location, any kind of breakdown that you have. So we went through creating, well, I didn't show, but I talked about creating these info sets, which then allows you to store the information back in the Sage 300 database, which is convenient for reporting actual versus budget, or facilitates reporting when you need it. And these are the examples that I went through and showed you. So The next module that Stacey thought would be useful for you to see is our module called Extender. So again, Extender is much easier to demonstrate than to explain via PowerPoint. But so I'll probably spend most of the time showing you in the software and then come back to the slides to talk to them. But what Extender allows you to do is to cost effectively have customizations or configurations done on your Sage 300 company database, which allows you to extend the Sage 300 core functionality such that it meets your specific business processes. For example, the Sage 300 customers screen allows you to define a credit limit. And if the customer exceeds that credit limit, then you'll get warnings and orders will go on hold and you won't be able to process, or invoices won't be able to be posted if you've set the system up that way. But nothing really, once you have the ability to amend the customer, there's no way you can say, Anne can create the customer name and address and so on, but can't amend the existing credit limit. So you can apply your own specific validations and or customizations around Sage 300 screens. I should say not screens, but business logic. So I could easily say, monitor who changes the credit limit. I can easily say, send me an email if somebody changes the credit limit. So it can do logging and alerting as to exceptions happening in your database. And with a small amount of customization, I could say, only let certain people amend the credit limit, or only let certain people amend the credit limit to a certain value. So that does require a little bit of customization, but the way the customization is done is in an open source scripting language, and the customization gets imported into your database. So when you upgrade, the customizations will upgrade as well. They don't need to be reapplied as they do with the traditional way of updating Sage 300. So I've done a lot of talking and not a lot of showing, so I'm going to flip first into the software again. Show you that exact example, show you even how I configured that, and then show you other examples that we can do with Extender. So in my accounts receivable AR customers, what I've configured for this particular case is when somebody changes the customer's credit limit, send an email, but also create a note saying when that credit limit was last changed. So you remember last week we went through our information manager notes module, and I did briefly touch on this particular note here, which is showing me the date and time, who changed the credit limit. So the credit limit was last changed by admin doing an update earlier this morning, and it was changed from $200,000 to $20,000. So the purpose of this note would not be to show it around the customer screen. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. But the purpose of this note is to show it in order entry. So when people are entering orders, they can see what the current credit limit is and who changed it last. So on the processing tab, I see the credit limit is 20,000, and if I want to update it, maybe I want to update it not to 19,999, but to 17,000, let's say. And when I click save, the system's doing three things. It's updating this, so the next person in order entry would see an amendment. It's sent an email alerting those who need to know that the credit limit has changed. The email is configurable and pretty much can contain any information like the note can. But it's also logged that change. So if I go to Extender to the logs or to print the report, I could see who changed what when. But we also have a hotkey which can pull up the log at defaults in the last calendar month. So in the last calendar month, admin has done the following changes to customer 1200. It's just the most recent one. It's changed the credit limit from 20,000 to 17. I've also been changing the on hold flag, and here you can see some of the other changes that have been done. And if I change the date range, and I have been fiddling around with my dates, if I change the date range, you know, you would see all the changes that have ever happened against this particular customer, those ones that you're logging. So Extender can be used to not only, you know, alert people that things have changed, but also log that it's changed. And the alert could be in two forms, via a note, like this, if you're using Information Manager notes, or just via an email, as the email that got sent. But you can also use Extender to apply your own validations and customizations around these screens. So without configuring the AR customer screen, just in the background by applying a script, what I've done is applied a script to say that admin can't change the credit limit to more than 20,000, and any other user can't change the credit limit to more than 10,000. So if I try and update this to 30,000, for example, straight away I'm getting this error message, the maximum credit limit is 20,000. So whether I use this data entry method through this normal Sage 300 screen, or if I had gone File Import and imported with an increased credit limit, or indeed if I'm using the web screens, and I need to just sign in again, my session has signed out, or indeed if I'm using the web screens, because all these updates go through the Sage 300 views, which is where we've applied that logic. It seems my thing has going very slowly, maybe some services have gone to sleep. So if I sign in as admin as well to the web screens, and go to the customer screen to do the same update, because you may be using a mixture between the web screens and the desktop screens. So if I go onto my customer screens and go to customer 1200 and attempt to amend the credit limit in the same way. So if customer 1200 and go to the processing tab. And again, if I change this to 30,000, so the updating is slightly different. It will only happen, you know, because webs don't work completely always connected. So I'm getting exactly the same error message coming through. So any third-party software that's updating properly through the views, you would not be able to amend the credit limit other than what the rules that you've specified in Extender. And how did that happen? So if I go back to my desktop and I go to our Extender module, what you can do is define your own events. And I've defined 4 types of events in this particular database. 3, sorry. One was to log a change. So that was the event, all I needed to do to log my change on my credit limit. I first create the event, and then I go and attach it to my customer and to the credit limit field. Another event that I created was the email for the changing of the credit limit field. And in the email template, I can define what fields I want to go in the email. So my email would be very similar to the note I showed you. Customer 1200, Mr. Ronald Back, credit limit changed from what it was originally and what it changed to, and who did it and the date and time they did it. And the other note, the note that I showed you, that orange note that showed by the customer screen, was created by this particular event with this particular email template. So having created my events, then I would go to the views and attach those particular events. So clicking on this info button would show me all the views that are active in this particular company. And as you would expect, it's all the core modules, AP, AR, GL, and so on. But it also includes any third party that you're running if they've done their development through the SDK. So if you're using Norming's fixed assets or Pacific Technologies purchase workflow, or indeed service managers service management, certainly any of the Orchid modules like EFT or RMA, whatever validations you're doing on your core modules, you could be doing and applying to these custom modules as well. And so just picking up our customer view, what we can see is the credit limit field is being logged. The credit limit field is creating that email for the that got sent based on the credit limit changing. The credit limit field also maintained that information manager note, and the on hold flag has been logged. So I can attach my events to any of the standard fields associated with this particular business logic, as well as the insert, delete, or update events on those particular records. So you could be validating all the extra validations that you need. You know, you might be using the customer territory in a slightly different way. It's just a text field on the AR customer, but you might want to require that it's one of your 6 territory fields. So you could do a validation to say, if the territory field is not one of these 6 values, then give an error message and ensure your data is correct at the time of data entry, not later when you find that certain sales invoices don't appear on certain reports because the data was not entered correctly as you needed it. And this can apply across the entire system. I've just done a small demonstration around AR customers, but this could be on orders, purchase orders, wherever you need those sorts of validations, you can apply those validations. So this is the logging and the attaching of the events, but on the scripts tab, this is where you would attach your own custom scripts. We have many samples, and EBSOL can create more scripts for you to do the specific validations that you need. And as I said, these are imported into the database. They are text files, so you don't need to recompile them between versions, and upgrading this database to the new version, these scripts will upgrade as well. And the last thing that Extender can do for you is you can create, or EBSOL can help you create custom tables. And why this is important is if you are doing integrations or having to have your own processes that need a few parameters to keep extra, extra information around it, you can create custom tables. And the important thing about that is in the background, it creates a Sage 300 view for you, so a business logic piece for you. And what you need to know about that, or why it's important that this gets created, is this table is available now through all the standard Sage 300 reporting, and is available for all the standard customization utilities that people use in doing customizations. So no longer does your own custom requirements sit outside or separate from the underlying core system. This data will be backed up with at the same time as the core company data. It is the same data. The customizations will be backed up with the database, and in terms of upgrading, where we typically use the Sage 300 dump and load features to move from one server to another, it is supported by that as well. This particular table, why we have it, or why it was designed, you may or may not know, you may be using AR optional fields against AR items. Sorry, you may want AR optional fields on AR invoices, but they can't in the base product be associated with AR items. So by creating a table to associate for an accounts receivable item which optional field you want to default, you could use this to automatically pre-populate optional fields onto your AR invoices that you need for analysis purposes. And that's really what I wanted to show you on Extender. And what I have talked to is that you can use it for logging and alerting and validation of data. You can, sorry, this is the validation of data, and you can apply your own custom processes, and you can also create your own Sage 300 views and tables in the database to make your integrations seamless from a Sage 300 point of view, and so that they support all the standard reporting utilities and database utilities that Sage 300 does. So at this stage, I'm going to open up for questions. So you are currently muted, so either type your question in the chat box or just unmute yourselves by, clicking on your mute button, and open up, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in this regard or in any of our modules regard. So while you're composing your questions, if you go to orchid.systems, we have a lot of information and videos and testimonials on these products, and perhaps ideas on how they could work for you in a closer way. Stacey, any comments?
Stacey here. What I really like about most of the queries I get support-wise from clients is, oh, we've put something in wrong, Accpac or Sage 300 is so annoying to take it out. If they could put more of that validation on, like you've done, and impose the rules as they're putting the data in, then that alleviates that issue and it makes everything going in easier. And I really love the extender, like it gives the power back to the users for requesting changes. For so long they've had to rely on development and high costs of development, and every upgrade, or you've got to pay to get that done. I think it just opens up for them to sometimes have opportunities that they've said, no, look, it's not worth that to do it. If they've got the extender module, it just opens up so many things that they could be doing.
Yes, and also facilitating different customizations happening in different companies as well, because previously if you customize the order entry screen to do ABC, then it applies. We've done it across the board, but because these customizations now live in the company database, yes, you could import the same one into both, or you could have a different version, or different validations, different aspects happening in second and third databases to really tailor around each company.
Yeah. So I don't know, of the clients that are out there, has anybody got any questions? I really appreciate Anne's time. I like the way how she demonstrates with an example rather than just talking about her products to you guys, so that it helps picture how you could utilise it in your environments. But if you need any more info or think about a question later, Anne's, I say this all the time to her, but probably the best third-party developer team out there. These guys are very reactive to us. They're in the Australian market. They've filled so many gaps that make the Sage 300 product more a robust solution. So these are the guys that I always look to first when we're trying to put something in. So very confident with how that they could help you out if you guys have got anything.
Thank you, Stacey.
No worries. All right, guys. Well, I have recorded the session and I can get a copy out to you. If nobody's got any questions, we'll let Anne go.
Thanks very much, and thanks for attending. And yes, as Stacey says, let us know if you've got any questions, and we can specifically tailor to your exact requirements, a tailored demo for your exact requirements.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.